January 9th, 1945, 0712 hours. Outside the ruined village of Hatton, France, a 16-ton American light tank is turning toward 4 Panthers and 1 Tiger, not away from them, toward them. The German gunners are already doing the math. Their guns are bigger, their armor is thicker, their optics are cleaner. Their tanks weigh almost 3 times as much as the little American machine grinding through the snow. At 600 yards, this should not be a fight. It should be target practice. The first German round cracks across the field. It misses. Not by luck. The American tank is no longer where the gunner's sights said it had to be. The second round fires. Miss. The third follows a second later, and this one tears through a frozen apple tree behind the tank, throwing black branches into the snow. Still no hit. Because the little tank is not charging in a straight line. It is not zigzagging like a panicked scout. It is cutting sideways, biting into the frozen mud, sliding its hull just far enough to make every German firing solution arrive late. The Germans are trying to kill a target. But Lieutenant Nathan Cole has turned his M5A1 Stuart into a question. And for the next 11 minutes, no German gunner on that field can answer it. The Stuart's 37mm gun cannot punch through a Panther's front plate. It cannot crack a Tiger's nose. It cannot win the way tanks are supposed to win. So Cole's crew stops trying. They fire at vision ports. They fire at track pins. They fire at exposed range markers and gunners' optics. They turn the enemy's armor into a steel room with blind men inside. By 0723 hours, 1 Panther has thrown a track. A second is reversing into a ditch with its commander screaming directions through a cracked periscope. The Tiger has fired 4 times and hit nothing. And the little American tank, the machine every manual called too light for heavy contact, is still moving. 1 farm kid from Kansas, 1 transmission mechanic from Detroit, 1 unauthorized maneuver that was never taught, never approved, and almost got both men punished before anyone understood what they had found. That was all it took to expose the mistake hidden inside German heavy armor. Not the armor, not the gun, the assumption. For years, German heavy tanks had been designed around one promise. They would choose the range. At distance, that promise was almost unbeatable. A Panther could sit behind a hedgerow, put its long 75mm gun onto a target, and kill American armor before the American crew could do anything meaningful in return. A Tiger could take punishment that would tear a light tank apart. And the Stuart? The Stuart was supposed to scout, report, and disappear. That was the official logic. Look first. Shoot only if necessary. Survive long enough to bring someone heavier to the fight. By the winter of 1945, light tank crews knew exactly what that meant. It meant they were riding in fast coffins. The Stuart's speed was real, but speed on a road did not matter when an enemy gun could cover the road. Its 37mm cannon was accurate, but accuracy did not matter when the shell struck German armor and broke apart like thrown glass. The tank was useful against trucks, infantry positions, field guns, and soft targets. Against Panthers and Tigers, it was not a tank, it was bait. That was the rule Nathan Cole inherited when his platoon entered eastern France. Cole was 24 years old, narrow-faced, quiet, and built like a man who had grown up carrying feed sacks before sunrise. His family farm sat outside Salina, Kansas, where wind could flatten a wheat field and dust could get inside anything that moved. He had learned machines before he learned books. Not because he loved machinery in some polished engineer's way, because broken machinery meant work stopped. And on a farm, when work stopped, money stopped with it. Cole trusted manuals for one thing, telling him what the factory wanted the machine to do. He did not trust them to tell him everything the machine could do when the ground turned ugly. His driver, Corporal Mateo Rivas, understood the same truth from another world entirely. Rivas had grown up over his uncle's repair garage on the east side of Detroit, where streetcars, delivery trucks, and overloaded shop vans came in coughing smoke and left only if somebody found a way around what the broken part was supposed to mean. Rivas could listen to a gearbox and hear trouble before the needle showed it. He could feel through the steering levers when the left track had more bite than the right. He did not use fancy words for it. He said the tank talked through the floor, and in December, while the battalion was waiting behind the line, Rivas noticed something the manual never treated as important. On frozen mud, the Stuart did not simply turn. It could be made to kick. If the driver snapped power through second gear, feathered the clutch, cut one brake, and then released before the track locked, the hull would yaw sideways without losing all forward momentum. Not a spin, not a skid. A controlled wound in the tank's path. A cut. Cole saw it during a maintenance run behind a barn. The Stuart came across the yard, swung its nose 30 degrees left, and then snapped back right so violently that snow lifted off the hull. Cole stared at the track marks. They were not curves. They were broken angles. He asked Rivas to do it again. Rivas did, then again, then again. By the fourth run, Cole was no longer watching the tank. He was imagining a German gunner trying to follow it. That was the beginning of what the crew started calling the sawtooth run. Not because it sounded brave, because that was what the marks looked like in the snow. Sharp bite, short line. Sharp bite, short line. A path no gunner could trust twice. For 2 weeks they practiced it where no one with rank was paying attention. The commander called the changes. The driver cut the machine sideways. The gunner, Sergeant Alvin Price, learned to fire during the half-second when the hull settled before the next bite. Price hated the maneuver at first. It threw his shoulder into the gun mount and made the sight picture jump like a fish on a hook. But after a week, he stopped cursing Rivas and started counting with him. 3, cut. 2, hold, fire. 1, cut again. The whole crew became a timing device, not a better gun. Not thicker armor, timing, that was the weapon. On the morning of January 9th, they did not plan to prove it. Their Stuart had been sent forward to check a road junction outside Hatton, while American infantry tried to feel out the German line. The weather was white and bitter, snow over frozen mud, smoke hanging low from shell-damaged roofs, visibility breaking open and closing again like a door. At 0706, Cole saw shapes through the fog, too large for half-tracks, too square for trucks. The lead Panther came through the orchard first, its gun barrel swinging slowly across the road. Then another, then a third, then the Tiger behind them, heavier and darker, moving like a house with tracks under it. Cole could have reversed. That would have been doctrine. He could have dropped smoke and called for artillery. That would have been sensible. But the road behind him was narrow, and infantry from the 79th Division was already moving up through drainage ditches on both sides. If Cole backed out in a panic, he would not just save his tank. He would uncover the men behind him. Inside the Stuart, nobody gave a speech. Cole said, "Mateo, sawtooth." Rivas answered, "I have it." Price said, "What am I shooting?" Cole looked through his periscope at the German tanks settling into line. Anything that lets them see us. That was the order. Not kill them, blind them. The first German shot passed close enough that the Stuart's hull rang like someone had struck it with a hammer. Rivas cut left, The tank lunged sideways. Cole felt his ribs hit the turret wall. Price cursed, found the sight, and fired. The 37mm shell hit a Panther's mantlet and did nothing. Nothing visible, nothing heroic, nothing that would make a war poster. But the Panther commander flinched below the hatch line, and for 1 second his gunner lost the track. That was enough. Cole called right. Rivas cut right. The second German round passed behind them. Price reloaded. At 400 yards, Cole stopped aiming at armor. He aimed at the enemy's senses. One shell into the lead Panther's exposed range stake. One into the left headlamp cluster and the thin steel around the driver's visor. One high-explosive round bursting near the Tiger's cupola, not penetrating anything, but cracking glass and filling the commander's view with smoke and chips of paint. 11 minutes. That was the entire fight. 11 minutes of engine scream, clutch stink, German shells hitting empty air, and a light tank being driven like a machine that refused to accept its own weight class. When it ended, the Germans had not been destroyed. That was the strange part. That was also the important part. One Panther was immobilized. Two had damaged optics. The Tiger withdrew behind the orchard because it could not get a clean shot without turning its flank toward American anti-tank guns now being pulled into position. Cole's Stuart had fired 26 rounds. It had achieved 0 armor penetrations, and it had broken the attack. The first officer to read the report did not call it genius. He called it reckless. Major Ellis Strickland had spent 18 years in armor, and to him, what Cole had done was exactly the kind of stunt that got crews killed, and then got rewritten by survivors as courage. He summoned Cole to a command post set up in a stone cellar with blankets over the windows. The room smelled of wet wool, coffee, and lamp fuel. Strickland did not offer him coffee. He held the report in one hand and asked one question. "You drove toward them?" Cole stood with mud frozen on his boots. "Yes, sir. 4 Panthers and a Tiger." "Yes, sir." "In a Stuart?" "Yes, sir." Strickland put the report down slowly. "Lieutenant, either you discovered something the armored force forgot to teach the rest of us, or you risked 4 men because one lucky morning made you feel clever." That was the dangerous moment, not the German guns. This, because an idea can survive enemy fire and still die in a room with a desk in it. Cole did not argue that he was brave. He did not say he had no choice. He did not try to make the fight sound cleaner than it was. He said, "Sir, they can kill us if they own the range. We did not let them own it." Strickland stared at him. Cole continued, "Their turrets and sights are built around prediction. We stopped giving them a path they could predict. The major said, 'Your gun cannot penetrate them.' 'No, sir.' 'Then what are you calling this?' Cole looked down at the report. A way to make them miss long enough for everything else to matter. That answer did not save him. Not yet. Cole was confined to his platoon area while the battalion decided whether his result was evidence or accident. And for 3 days, the Sawtooth run almost died under its own success. Other crews tried to imitate it after hearing the story. They had the courage. They did not have the timing. One Stuart threw a track during practice and slid into a frozen ditch. Another burned out a clutch so badly the maintenance sergeant said it smelled like the devil's kitchen. A third driver locked one brake too long, spun the tank hard left, and nearly crushed 2 infantrymen standing near a wall. By January 12th, Strickland had a new report on his desk. The maneuver that had saved Cole's crew was now damaging tanks faster than the Germans were. And this time the criticism was fair. Rivas read the maintenance notes in silence. Then he said the line that changed everything. "They're copying the shape, not the feel. Cole looked at him. Rivas tapped the floor plate with his boot. The tank tells you before it breaks loose. If you wait until you see it, you're late. If you force it after that, you kill the clutch. They need to learn the warning before the kick. That was not doctrine. That was craft, and craft is hard for an army to move quickly, because craft lives in the hands of people who learned the hard way. But Captain David Mercer, the battalion intelligence officer, understood enough mathematics to recognize what was hiding under Rivas's language. Mercer had been a civil engineering instructor before the war. He measured the track marks outside Hatton. He interviewed the infantry who watched the fight. He compared the Stuart's direction changes to known German turret, traverse rates, and engagement times. Then he wrote the first report that turned the sawtooth run from a story into an argument. At long range, the Stuart was dead. At medium range, it was nearly dead. But inside 400 yards, on broken frozen ground, with direction changes every 3 to 4 seconds, a heavy tank gunner had to solve a firing problem faster than his turret, sight, and commander could cooperate. The German tank was still powerful, but power did not matter if it arrived 1 second late. Mercer arranged a demonstration in a snow-covered pasture behind the line. 3 American gunners were placed in observation positions with field glasses and timing boards. Wooden stakes marked imagined German firing points. Rivas drove. Cole called the cuts. Price fired blanks at the moments his sight picture steadied. At 800 yards, the observers had no trouble tracking the Stuart. At 600, they started missing the call. At 400, the timing boards became useless. At 300, one observer lowered his glasses and said, "I can't hold him." Strickland heard it. Everyone heard it. The Stuart came to a stop with steam rising from the rear deck and snow packed into the suspension. Rivas opened his hatch, face gray from concentration. For a long moment, Strickland said nothing. Then he turned to Mercer. "Write it so a driver can understand it." Mercer said, "Rivas should write it." Rivas laughed once, because he thought it was a joke. It was not. For the next 5 days, Corporal Mateo Rivas was pulled out of his crew and sent from platoon to platoon with Cole beside him. He did not teach the sawtooth run like a stunt. He taught it like a warning system. Listen for the engine drop. Feel the left track start to float. Never hold the brake after the hull begins to answer. Cut before the gunner settles, not after. He made drivers practice at walking speed first, then faster, then in pairs, then with a gunner calling out fake targets. Men who had spent months believing their Stuarts were only good for running began to learn that running was not the same as maneuver. One sergeant asked Rivas, "So this makes us tiger killers?" Rivas shook his head. "No, it makes you hard to kill while someone else does the killing." That was the truth. And because it was true, the crews trusted it. The Germans adapted too. Good armies do. By mid-January, German heavy tanks near Hatton and Rittershofen began refusing close approaches without infantry screening them. Panzerfaust teams moved into barns and cellar mouths. Machine guns were placed to rake the ground where a Stuart would need to cut. The window was closing. If Cole's idea was going to become more than one lucky fight, it needed a second proof. It came at a frozen bridge road south of Rittershofen on January 17th. 2 Panthers held the road. A tiger sat back behind them near a line of bare poplars. German infantry occupied the ditch lines with anti-tank weapons. American Shermans had already been warned off the approach because the road was too exposed, and the frozen shoulders too soft. A frontal push would be expensive. A delay would give the Germans time to reinforce the village. So Strickland made a decision that would have sounded insane a week earlier. He sent 4 Stuarts forward first, not as bait, as the key. Cole led the left pair. Another lieutenant led the right. Their orders were simple. Do not duel. Do not chase glory. Break the German sight picture. Draw the turrets. Blind what you can. Force movement. Then let the Shermans and anti-tank guns do the heavy work. The Stuarts came out of the fog low and fast. The German infantry opened fire first. Bullets snapped off the hulls. A Panzerfaust fired too early and vanished into the snow behind Cole's tank. Rivas cut left, then right, then held just long enough for Price to send a shell into the ditch mouth where the smoke had come from. The Panthers turned toward Cole's pair. That was the trap. The right side Stuarts closed the angle while the Panther turrets were still moving left. One American shell struck a Panther's track assembly from the side. Not with enough force to destroy the tank outright, but enough to damage a guide horn and jam the track under stress. The Panther lurched. Its driver corrected. The track peeled. 60,000 pounds of German confidence stopped moving at the edge of the road. Then the Tiger fired. For 1 second, everything became white noise. The round struck behind Cole and lifted a sheet of frozen earth into the air. Inside the Stuart, Price's headset went dead for 2 seconds. Cole tasted blood where his teeth had cut his lip. Rivas did not stop. He cut again, harder than before. The Stuart slid so close to the road ditch that the right track threw ice into the open air. Cole saw the Tiger's barrel trying to follow them. Too slow, too late, too much machine trying to answer too little time. He called, "Cupola." Price fired. The shell burst against the turret roof hardware and showered the Tiger's optics with fragments. It did not kill the Tiger. It made the commander blind at the exact moment he needed to see. That was enough. The Tiger reversed. The second Panther followed. The German infantry, stripped of the armored certainty behind them, began falling back through the orchard. 20 minutes later, American Shermans were across the bridge road. By noon, the position was gone. American losses. 1 Stuart damaged, recovered that night. No crew killed. German losses. 1 Panther immobilized. 1 Panther mission killed. 1 Tiger forced out of the line long enough for the road to collapse. No grand miracle. No impossible penetration. No little gun magically defeating thick steel. Something better. A small machine had changed the terms of the fight. After that, Strickland stopped calling it reckless. He still did not call it beautiful. Men like Strickland were suspicious of beautiful ideas. He called it useful. In war, useful is a kind of blessing. Mercer wrote the procedure into a field note. Rivas trained 12 more drivers before the fighting moved east. Cole was promoted before spring, though he never cared for the paper as much as the fact that his crew was still alive to read it. Price kept a cracked German vision block in his kit until the end of the war. Not as a trophy. As a reminder, he said it proved the gun had done its job even when it could not pierce the armor. Most military lessons do not arrive cleanly. They arrive covered in mud, argued over by angry officers, half broken by people copying the wrong part, and nearly buried because the institution has a memory longer than its imagination. The German heavy tank was not a failure. That is too easy. The Panther and Tiger were terrifying machines when the fight stayed inside the world they were built to dominate. Long sight lines, clean fire lanes, measured range. A target that behaved the way a target should. Cole and Rivas did not make the Stuart stronger than a Panther. They made the Panther's strength arrive late. That was the crack, not in the steel. in the assumption behind the steel. After the war, men carried different pieces of that winter home. Cole returned to Kansas and spent years repairing tractors in a shed that smelled of oil and dust. Rivas went back to Detroit, opened a transmission shop, and became the kind of mechanic people trusted when 3 other shops had already failed. Mercer stayed in uniform long enough to teach younger officers that doctrine was not a law of nature. Strickland, according to men who served under him later, never became soft, but he did become slower to dismiss a report just because it sounded impossible. And Price? Price told his grandson once that the bravest thing he ever saw was not a man standing still under fire. It was a driver who knew exactly when not to. That is the part the machines cannot teach. A tank has weight. A gun has range. Armor has thickness. A gearbox has limits. But people decide which limits matter. On January 9th, in a field outside Hatton, a light tank rolled toward 5 heavier machines and survived not because it became more powerful, but because 4 men understood the one thing their enemy had forgotten. Range is not just distance. Range is permission. The Germans had built their heavy tanks to own it. Nathan Cole and Mateo Rivas took it away. The little tank did not beat the monsters by becoming bigger. It beat them by refusing the distance that made them monsters.